Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for being here tonight. This is Rachel, and I am here with my very special guest, Ingrid Caswell, and really looking forward to our conversation tonight on anger, aggression, and rage. What is the difference? And we are going to really get some great insights about that tonight. So I'm going to be telling you a little bit about myself and how Ingrid and I got connected, and then she's going to really launch into breaking it down for us so that we can really understand each of these emotions and how they're unique and how they're similar. And if you don't already know me, I am a sexual abuse recovery coach and also the author of Beyond Surviving, the Final Stage in Recovery from Sexual Abuse. And I work with survivors of childhood sexual abuse who are just sick and tired of feeling broken and unfixable and burdened by the past. And I really help them let go of the pain of abuse and finally move on with their lives. And you're more than welcome to come and check that out and learn more about the Beyond Surviving program at www.rachelgrantcoaching.com. And our very special guest tonight, Ingrid, is a marriage and family therapist intern. Really, she focuses her work on anxiety and depression, childhood trauma, and codependency recovery. And so she works with adults, couples, individuals, families, kids. My goodness, what does she not do? It's amazing. All out of her offices in Beverly Hills and Sherman Oaks, California. And she has done trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy with foster kids and caregivers who have been victims of crime. And she's also worked with teenagers struggling with addiction, self-harm, and dual diagnoses of bipolar and borderline personality disorder. So she has a huge heart, first of all, we know, because of all of that, and a lot of skill and a lot of talent to be able to be doing that work. And she also has a master's in clinical psychology from Antioch University, Los Angeles, and she is trained extensively at the Santa Monica UCLA Medical Center in mindful parenting, an approach that really promotes sensitivity and flexibility in communication between parent and child. And then finally, the reason why I really got connected with Ingrid is because she's a certified anger management specialist. And she facilitates anger management groups and works one-on-one as an executive anger management coach with volunteer and court-ordered clients. She's a co-presenter at Anger Management Essentials, an anger management training program for counselors and therapists, and she's also the vice president of the California Association of Anger Management Providers, dedicated to standardizing materials and increasing public knowledge of anger management through conferences, media, and legislative efforts. And I really found Ingrid by way of another colleague of mine, and I just knew that this topic was one that needed to be talked about for us survivors, that it's something that we often avoid or we don't understand, don't know how to deal with. And I have certainly, work with my clients around anger and have my, kind of strategies and points of view. But one of the things that I'm committed to is really bringing experts in. And so Anita, referred me to Ingrid, and just in the first minutes of chatting with her, I was like, yep, sure, got to do it. Let's go. Because she just knows her stuff. She's got a great spirit, a great heart, and you guys are in for a real treat tonight. So Ingrid, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Rachel. Yes, of course. Absolutely. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. So just to kind of get the ball rolling tonight, Ingrid, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and kind of how you found your way to doing some of the work that you're doing these days?
Sure. So, I'll tell you a little bit about my background. The truth is that I've always been pretty high functioning, but what I didn't realize until I was pretty well into my 30s was that I had struggled my whole life with depression. There's a history of depression in my family, and there was a lot of abuse in my childhood, emotional, sexual, intellectual abuse, all the developmental years of my growing up. And, they say when it comes to mental illness, your genes load the gun and your environment pulls the trigger. So I had a very strong setup for depression. However, as I mentioned before, I had always managed to be pretty high functioning. I was high school valedictorian. I was president of this club and that club. And that's because when I was growing up, I also had some protective factors that counterbalanced the abuse in some areas. I happened to be born with a pretty resilient temperament. I had a very warm and nurturing grandmother. I had an above average intelligence. And although my parents were abusive, they were well educated. And as I learned later, all of these factors contributed to my overall level of functioning because, as you know, Rachel, things are not black and white. We all have strengths and weaknesses. But one of my weaknesses, and I think the main one that I began to notice once I got into college, was in choosing relationship partners. I noticed that I was choosing people that were not healthy for me. And I got into therapy, and I sort of stumbled along through my 20s, relationship-wise, still, continuing to be an overachiever in other areas. And therapy definitely, helped me to manage my life. And then finally in my late 20s, I did meet someone and get married, and I saw that as such a victory for me in terms of learning to choose healthy people. I saw myself as being grown up and healed enough from childhood to be ready to commit to a life partner.
Yeah.
And so I got married, and I had 2 gorgeous kids, and I was married for 12 years, and then my marriage ended. And it ended in a way that was very traumatizing for me. And I won't go into a lot of detail, in this public forum, but the way that my marriage ended was shocking for me. And as my therapist explained it to me, I experienced what we call a re-traumatization of my childhood. So all the things that I had thought that I had dealt with in my childhood in therapy, actually I wasn't finished with. I mean, to an extent, I had dealt with a lot of it. It had really helped me to manage my life. But what I hadn't really sorted through was this very expert way that I used minimizing and intellectualizing to get through my life. And the end of my marriage was really a fast path to finally having to deal in a really hardcore way with my codependency that stemmed from my abuse. So today I really, really I feel very passionately about working with people in the area of codependency. It's fascinating to me. As a therapist, I get so much pleasure watching people recover and become assertive, moderate in their thinking and feeling, realistic, able to see grays instead of blacks and white. And honestly, anger management is something that I fell into sort of accidentally, and I kind of hate it when people say things like that, but it really is true. I started my internship as a marriage and family therapist in private practice with a wonderful supervisor and clinician who also happened to be the owner and director of her own company, Anger Management 818. And so when I signed on with her as an intern, part of my job description when I started to work for her was to facilitate these anger management groups. And I'll tell you, prior to that, my perception of somebody who needed anger management was this cartoon-like figure who's got steam coming out of his ears and he's yelling and screaming and maybe, physically violent. The truth is I had never really thought very much about anger, either, not in myself and not very much, in my work as a therapist. Sadness, grief, anxiety, those were the feelings that I really most identified with. But as I trained in anger management and I began to work with people's anger, I became aware of how critical anger is to our well-being and that it differs very greatly from aggression and rage. So that I started to realize that cartoon guy with the steam coming out of his ears that I had in my head, that guy is not experiencing healthy anger, but rage. And I'm going to talk about, the differences in a minute. But anger, true anger in its healthy form, is absolutely essential to our ability to keep ourselves safe and to get our needs met. And this is something that people who come from an abusive background really struggle to do because it's something that was never modeled for them. So So what I've seen as a through line in my work with anger is that if people cannot communicate their needs effectively, their needs are not going to get met. And if you don't get your needs met, you're going to feel pretty angry and frustrated.
Right.
So anger management is actually all about learning to communicate in such a way that people want to meet your needs. Mm-hmm. And the question is always, so how do you do that? Well, first, I tell my dear clients, first you have to know what your needs actually are.
Right.
And it's so funny. Sometimes I'll say to a client, well, let's look first. What are your needs? Mm-hmm. And they're just a deer in headlights, and the look on their face is like, what do I want? What do you mean? How would I know that? And they learned very early on that their feelings didn't matter, and actually their golden ticket through life was to be cut off from what it was that they actually needed or wanted. So it was a survival mechanism that is now undermining them. So then I tell them, after you identify your needs, then you have to learn how to ask for them assertively. And that's a huge part of what we deal with in anger management. It sounds really simple, but that's where the brunt of the work comes in. And being assertive means being able to ask in a polite and mature and respectful way for what you want and not take the results personally. And, people who don't know how to do this, their anger is going to mutate into aggression or rage. And that's why I think it's really important for us to be able to distinguish amongst these three.
Right. Well, beautiful. And, thank you, first of all, for sharing some of your story. And, it is amazing how we find our way into places and we are like, okay, good, done, all done.
Yeah.
And then here comes life and all of its changes to kind of push us to the next level and say, hey, what about this? You want to take a look at that now? And when we have the courage and the resiliency to do that, there's always such a big payoff on the other side of it. So thank you for sharing that with us and modeling that. And really beautiful, how you found your way into this work. And let's really start unpacking this a little bit. You've given us kind of a picture of it. So what do you, in your experience and in this work that you've been doing for these years now, what do you notice are some of the main differences between anger, aggression, and rage?
Yeah, so they are very different. And I think the easiest way to explain it is to start off by letting you know how it is that they differ from one another. They differ from one another in several ways. They differ in terms of what they are a response to, how long they take to build up and go away, what the physical effects are. They are different in terms of their proportionality to the event, the provocation. They differ in terms of who they assign responsibility to, what their intention is, what their effect on other people's feelings is, and finally, what they ultimately result in.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Because that gives us kind of a framework. There's these different buckets, and there's going to be something different going on in each one of these buckets based on kind of where you are on this spectrum. Okay. All right. Yes. Well, okay, so let's start with anger. What's going on for, somebody who's feeling anger?
Okay, sure. So let's talk about anger, what it's a response to. So anger is a natural, healthy, emotional response to an injury or a threat. So anger is one of our primary feelings, just like sadness or fear. We've got to have it. We're wired to have the feeling of anger. And anger signals to us that something is not right, that we do not feel okay about what we're seeing, and that we'd better do something about it. The gift of anger is that it motivates us. It gives us energy. It gives us confidence to make really valuable changes in our lives. And the expression of anger is all about letting someone know in a controlled way that we feel threatened. And healthy anger is communicated assertively, like I explained before, without hysterics. So it says, I'm angry, here's why, and here's what I need. I'm angry, here's why, here's what I need. And most importantly, anger, and this is different from the others we're going to talk about, anger is about something that is happening in the present moment. or at least very close to the present moment.
Okay.
Anger, does that make sense? So when you're angry, truly angry, and you're not in aggression or rage, that's about something that's really happening right now in this moment. It's not about your past. It's not some unhealed thing.
Okay.
It builds slowly over time. It takes, maybe hours or even days to come on, and it subsides pretty quickly once the provocation ends, usually within 30 seconds to 2 minutes. So it's brief, and it's let go of with a sense of pleasure.
Okay.
So even as I'm saying this, I could imagine, like, if you're hearing this for the first time, you're like, oh, that's not what I'm feeling. Like that.
No, yeah. I was just
so,
about to say, like, man, I can remember, before I did a lot of my healing work, it definitely did not feel like I was kind of going into anger and coming out of anger. It felt like I was stuck in this place, which I'm sure we're gonna get to that, what that is. And boy, hysterics, talk about, I was an A+ student at hysterics, so
so absolutely
got that. Okay.
And so let's talk about the physical effects of anger. So anger, I don't want to get too sciencey on us, but anger is dealt with in our parasympathetic nervous system. So we've got a parasympathetic nervous system and a sympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is the same system that's responsible for salivating, digesting food, sleeping, having sex. You want to think about these functions as pleasurable ones that happen when we're at rest, when our body is at rest. And when we're experiencing true anger, our parasympathetic nervous system is running the show. And so our breathing deepens, our vision becomes more focused, we have a warm feeling in the skin, our movements become very smooth because our muscles are relaxed, and our memory becomes clear. These are all functions of having the parasympathetic nervous system take over. This is what happens when you're eating. This is what happens when you're sleeping. And it's the same thing that happens when you're feeling healthy anger.
Got it.
And because anger is about something that's happening right now in the present moment, the expression of it is proportional to the event. All right, it's moderate. And let's talk about the responsibility. When it comes to anger, somebody who's experiencing true anger will take responsibility for their feeling. So it might look something like, when I heard that you gave the promotion to your newly hired boyfriend, I thought all my years of work at this company are not valued, and I'm feeling angry. So it's when this happens, I feel angry, not you are making me feel angry. Right. It comes from an acceptance as opposed to denial that what has happened has actually happened. And you want to be careful not to confuse acceptance with like, because we often confuse the two because we only accept what we like.
Got it. I
right?
love that.
So,
yeah.
So when we talk about acceptance, you have to accept that this has happened. I'm not saying you have to like
what it is. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. Wonderful.
The intention of anger is to connect. Anger wants to get the listener's attention, inform, engage, communicate, and also anger doesn't demand any specific response. So it asserts itself, and then it lets the chips fall where they may without needing to control the outcome. And all responses that you get when you express your anger healthily are very valuable information for you in terms of making decisions about the future of that relationship. And so what I mean by that is, anger really does serve to draw other people's feelings out. It wants to connect. It wants to say, hey, here's what's going on with me, and I'm going to give you space to let me know what's going on with you. Those I statements allow the other person to engage in healthy communication without getting defensive. So if I'm the boss in that scenario, I can say, it wasn't my intention to make you feel undervalued here. I can see how you might feel that way. And guess what? The truth is that two positions have opened up simultaneously, and you're skipping a level, and you're going to be promoted above my boyfriend, or, whatever is the scenario.
Right. Gotcha.
And then finally, what does anger result in? Anger results in feeling really genuine and truly self-expressed. So what I mean by that is that at its very best, anger can draw people closer together, and it can enable them to get their needs met. Mm-hmm. And at the very least, it helps us to set boundaries with other people.
Right.
Because, if your boss says, you're right, I don't value your efforts at this company, that is crucial information that you can use to set a boundary for yourself.
Right.
And, at that point, maybe you decide, maybe you want to get a different job, where you're appreciated.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, one thing that really stands out for me as you start to kind of articulate the different pieces of anger is that, for those of us who have been abused, I know that if I had been hearing this when I was still really kind of dealing with a lot of the hurt and in a lot of it, and that it would just seem like a foreign concept, like what? Like this, huh? Mm-hmm. And how can it be healthy? And anger is always a bad thing. And what I really love that you're showing us here is that there's no such thing as a bad feeling or a good feeling. It's like this is just the emotion that's coming up. And there are ways that you can express it. And there are really healthy and powerful ways that you can express it. And super cool, it can be beneficial. It can actually help you out when you allow it to do what it needs to do. Unfortunately, so many of us learn to stuff, avoid, run away from anger, or we, express in all sorts of dangerous or unhealthy ways our anger, and we end up causing, more damage than good. So I love this. I love what you're modeling and showing us here of what, truly healthy anger can look like and the benefits of it. Yeah. So now, how does that stack up to something like aggression? Like, what are the differences there? How does aggression really compare to anger?
Right. Well, first of all, I think the most important thing is that if anger is a feeling, aggression is a behavior. Those are two very different things, and that's the primary difference that you need to understand, that aggression is a behavior. It's being verbally or emotionally or physically abusive. And like anger, aggression is a response to a perceived insult or a wrongdoing, but aggression looks very different from anger. And the reason is because this has to do with the way the person perceives the other person's intentions, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So let's look at an example of aggression in response to a perceived threat. And when I say a perceived threat, threat is a threat. Whether it's a real threat or a perceived threat, your brain processes it in the same way.
That's right, yeah.
So you guys may be familiar with this real-life scenario. It happened a few years back in Hollywood. An actor was shooting a scene in a movie, and the lighting director is walking around behind the camera within the actor's line of sight, and the actor becomes distracted and has to stop the scene because it's too difficult to concentrate on everything that he has to do to perform well, like remember his lines and step into the light at the right moment and pretend that the camera isn't there and all of that. While the lighting director is walking around behind the camera and distracting him. If the actor perceives that the lighting director is intentionally being insulting and disrespectful or trying to undermine his performance, the actor is going to be triggered for aggression. And he might become verbally and emotionally abusive or even attack the director physically. Whereas with healthy anger, the actor would not be focused at all on the other person's intent, but rather on his own feelings, and he would be able to say, please don't walk around during shooting, it's too distracting for me.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
So you can see that when it comes to assigned responsibility with aggression, it blames the other person, right, for the feeling.
You're doing something to me.
You're doing something purposefully and intentionally to harm me. And it perceives that the other's actions are disrespectful and that it's going to somehow require some sort of a retaliation. As far as time is concerned, as you can imagine, aggression is very impulsive. It comes on very quickly, and it's caused by tons of cortisol and adrenaline being dumped into the body system. So it can take quite a while to subside, hours and sometimes even days, while the body is struggling to process this chemical overload. Whereas anger is, comes on very slowly, but then it's released quickly. This comes on quickly and takes a very long time to subside. The physical effects of aggression, let's talk about those. So aggression is activated in the fight or flight nervous system. That's the sympathetic nervous system that I was talking about before. And that is the system responsible for the stimulation of activities that prepare you for action. So when there's a threat, the brain sends a signal to the pituitary gland, and cortisol and adrenaline are released. And when these hit the bloodstream, your heart rate increases, your body shakes, you get tunnel vision, hearing loss, even your digestion slows down. And this really makes sense because digestion is controlled by the parasympathetic nervous system, which cannot operate when the fight or flight system is in control. Only one can be in control at a time.
Right. So it's literally like parts of the brain go offline. It's like,
that's right.
No room for me here. I've got to shut down so this stuff can come online. Yeah.
Absolutely. Only one of those systems can be in control at a time. So the question is, why do our bodies do this in the first place? So in caveman times, you were okay if you could fight it or run away from it. The stronger your sympathetic nervous system was, the better. And the problem is that we no longer face this kind of threat in modern society, but our bodies have not changed. We're still built the same way.
Right.
So if we look at aggressive driving, for example, John Doe is sitting in his car, okay, and I'm in LA, so I see this all the time, right? We spend a lot of time talking about road rage. So John Doe is sitting in his car, and he's feeling very entitled to his little piece of the road and the way he wants to drive. And if someone is encroaching on his space or making decisions that are not in his best interest, he's going to feel threatened. And road rage is what occurs when your body prepares to face a threat in a situation where action is not possible. So for someone who's about to run a marathon, it's very helpful for your heart rate and your adrenaline levels to shoot up. Right. But if you're sitting in a traffic jam with nowhere to go, it's a recipe for disaster. And then also aggression is very over the top and disproportional to the event. It wants to cause emotional or physical harm. Kind of the goal of aggression is to frighten or punish or manipulate the other person. And so, of course, the effect on other people's feelings is that it's quite, trampling. Right. And what's really sad is that the result of aggression is often being very isolated because people learn to tiptoe around you, or they choose to, end their relationships with you altogether. And it can cause really serious problems, not only at home and in family relationships, but also at work and with the law. I see that a lot. And it's also responsible for medical problems on the light end, headaches and digestion and insomnia. But at the heavier end, there's heart attack and stroke that result from this. So there are a lot of consequences.
That's huge. That's a big deal. And, one of the things that comes to mind as you're saying that is, we have these, the physical responses. And, our body's being flooded with the cortisol and the hormones. And if what we're doing a lot of the time is then trying to stuff that or block that and not really be able to kind of process it through, then that really becomes, blocked in our nervous system. And what I love about, anger and healthy anger is that it really treats it like a cyclical thing, like it comes in and it goes out. It comes in and it goes out, and there's blockage happening here, We don't get backed up or stopped up with these emotions, whereas aggression, it sounds like, can very much be one of those things that then just kind of sits and it takes up space and residence, sort of. And one question that I'm curious about is do you find that this the tendency to be in this camp of aggression is solely because you don't have the strategies, you don't have the skills for how to focus on you in the situation, or is it because you don't have any outlets for expressing yourself, and so you just kind of go to this, kind of knee-jerk, well, I'm just going to attack and I'm threatened now and I'm going to go after people kind of a thing.
Absolutely. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, when we're talking about rage, or actually just coming up here. But, one of the problems with aggression is that it can become habitual because it works. When you are manipulative and controlling and scary, people, kind of start to do what you want them to do. And when you get that power, you get that control, it can be sort of addictive. And that's why you hear about, rageaholics, people who develop these addictions to doing something because it works. They get their way.
Right.
And often, people, it was modeled for them when they were growing up. They thought it worked for somebody else. Or they were so incapable of processing their own healthy anger that it ends up erupting in this aggression. In their adulthood. And that's sometimes what sends people in for therapy and or, anger management. But I wanted to talk about that. And if you want, we can talk about the rage, because I think that's going to answer your question.
Please, let's take a look at that now. Yeah.
The terms anger, aggression, and rage are very often interchanged on the street. You'll hear people using them all the time, interchangeably. But the purpose of distinguishing them for tonight in this conversation, it's easiest to think about rage as a math problem where you've got unexpressed anger and aggression present at the same time in their most intense forms. So if you could see it as a math problem, it would be anger plus aggression times 10.
Ooh.
And
okay.
So we're talking about unexpressed anger, right? Stuffed anger, which is a feeling, plus aggression, which is a behavior, right? And then and then I'm going to talk about why rage would be considered to be in its most intense form. And that is because rage is a response to a threat to our pride or our dignity, which is actually even more threatening sometimes than a threat to, say, even just our physical bodies.
Safety.
The roots of rage are really in childhood. So this was when, a kid was helpless against abusive adults or older kids. And when something in the present triggers an old memory, the reaction is to the memory. It's not to the present event.
Right.
And that's why the behavior is so frightening and unexpected, and it seems so inappropriate. So rage is not a feeling so much as it's an emergency defense. It's activated, it's in the fight or flight sympathetic nervous system. They've done studies when rage is triggered, there's, conflict recognition areas of the emotional brain, and they totally lose contact with that prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the part of your brain responsible for making rational decisions, the part of your brain that says, if I do this, what might be the consequence? And what might be the best, decision?
Offline, done, off.
That's exactly right. I love that. I love that term. It goes offline. And when that reptilian brain, that old brain, loses contact with the prefrontal, that's what's running the show, and all bets are off. Gotcha. And so rage can actually be activated by something external, like the murder of a loved one or something, or it can erupt after being stuffed, multiple unexpressed anger. And when we're enraged, we really do believe that somebody is deliberately trying to incite us and that we have to even the score. And rage is a response to several things. The first one I want to talk about is shame. Shame is, and I'm sure you've talked about this a lot on your show, Rachel, shame, the way that I like to look at it, shame is a feeling of inadequacy, and it's an inability to justify your existence. So whereas guilt says, I did something bad, stop doing it, shame says, I am bad, I should not exist. And this is an intolerable feeling. and rage is an escape from it. But of course, rage is a future cause of shame, and this is what perpetuates that shame-rage cycle.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to talk about rage is abandonment. It can be a response to abandonment. Being left out is devastating for a kid, and many people carry this wound into adulthood. And when this abandonment isn't healed, sometimes even a temporary separation from a partner who leaves to go to work or a difference of opinion can be a rage trigger, you know.
Yeah.
Exposure is another thing. Rage can be triggered by exposure. So, you know, a lot of people that struggle with rage have a lot of denial. And when something happens that uncovers evidence that something that the rager has been denying is in fact true, that can be a rage trigger.
Got it. Yeah, like your jig is up here, and and the being seen and being found out kind of a thing.
Yes, and absolutely. And then again, you know, what I was talking about earlier, that power and control becoming rage enforcers. You know, if you can intimidate others and get powerful and get control, you know, that's reinforcement for more rage. And we see this most evidently in domestic abuse.
Yeah.
And then just one more thing on this is another thing that can contribute to rage is disinhibition. When you're raging, you're on an adrenaline high. And I think we all know that adrenaline decreases your inhibition.
You know, thank you so much for that, because there's so much that's coming up for me as you're sharing this, because there was definitely a time in my life when rage was a huge issue for me. And people would be surprised, because I'm normally, you know, a laughy, happy person. I had the duality, right? I seem just like to be getting on in life, but my goodness, in my partnerships, in my relationships, rage was a big, big thing. And, you know, I remember those moments of basically feeling like I just lost it. You know, I'm just losing it. It's almost like I don't even have any say here. Something takes over, and before I know it, I'm throwing Tupperware, and I'm freaking out, and I'm yelling, and I'm doing all sorts of things that, yes, like the very next day, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed by that, and I'm so ashamed of that. And and that just makes it all the harder. And oftentimes it was triggered around these moments when it felt like I was about to experience the loss, or I perceived that somebody was trying to get one over on me or take advantage of me, right? And so I think this is so, so true for us survivors of sexual abuse, that there is a lot going on there for us. And when we don't have a healthy outlet and we don't know how to really express ourselves, and like you were saying at the very beginning, sometimes we don't even know what we need. We become so disconnected even from our own needs that we find ourselves in this place. So I just want to take a moment here to say, you know, if you're here with us tonight and you have done some things in a fit of aggression or a fit of rage, you know, I just want you to know that you have made choices, and it sucks, but you yourself are not bad, and that there really is a way to retrain your system, to retrain your brain so that you don't have to go into those responses. And I just want, you know, to know you're human, and it's understandable. And so, yeah, I just felt like I wanted to throw that in there before we moved to this next piece here, which is kind of when we're getting into rage, you know, what's the timing of that? How does it come up, and how does it compare to aggression and anger?
Well, you just put your finger on it. You said when I'm in my kitchen and I'm throwing my Tupperware, and it's like 1 minute I'm okay and the next minute I've lost and I don't know what happened. You know, that it reminds me of how sometimes people will say, I'm getting angry. Or you'll hear a mom say to their kid, I'm getting angry, but you never hear people say, I'm getting enraged. And that is because there's no getting there with rage, right?
You're just there.
It's there. It's like fight or flight reaction. The chemicals are dumped into my bloodstream. They've hijacked my body and my mind. You know, it's instantaneous. I mean, once this adrenaline hits your bloodstream, it lasts for a couple of hours. And I don't know, you know, what you do for relaxation, but unless you actively practice it, muscle tension is very hard to reverse. It takes a long time for that stuff to go out of your system.
Yeah.
And so very similar to aggression, you know, the physical effects, the muscle tension, the pounding heart, the shallow breathing. And one thing that, you know, I'm sure that this is a phenomenon that's always fascinated me, severely compromised memory, if not total blackout of memory. When people are in a rage, you've heard the expression of blind rage.
Yes.
People are capable of doing things that really seem physically impossible. And that is because, you know, so when you see like a mother lift a car off a baby or whatever, that's because adrenaline increases your physical strength, it raises endurance levels, and most importantly, it dulls the pain sensation. You see somebody put their fist through a wall, it's like, how can you do that over and over again? Well, the adrenaline is flooding their body, and they're not feeling any pain in that moment. Right. And not only that, when somebody does experience a blackout, they don't remember the rage afterward, which fuels the denial. So it can be a really, really vicious cycle. And obviously, that's not something you can bring on yourself. I'm not controlling how much adrenaline I'm pumping into my body. You know, I mean, I am ultimately. But when you say it's not your fault, you're not a bad person, this is physical. This is all connected. What's going on in your head, what's going on in your body. Obviously, the proportionality to provocation in terms of rage, even though it might be triggered by something in the present, rage is an over-the-top, disproportional reaction to a situation because rage is about something that happened a long time ago that has not been healed from. And that's why it seems when you see it.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's why it seems excessive, you know, and inappropriate. And that's what's meant by that expression, you know, if it's hysterical, it's historical.
I love that.
I always try to, you know, when I talk to my clients about your level of emotions, you know, if you have a scale of emotion from 0 to 10, where 0 is your most calm and 10 is your most whacked out crazy, they say anything over a 3 is not about what's going on in the present.
Yeah. It's the age-old, it's really not about the toilet paper. You know, it's really not about the dirty dishes. It's really not about any of the things that you're screaming about. It's really about the hurt and the pain and the unresolved things that are sitting there for you. Yeah.
That's exactly right. And, you know, I hear people talk about, you know, people that are in, you know, long-term, you know, romantic relationships with people that are ragers, and they describe this it's sort of like a shocking disbelief that this person that they love so much and care for so deeply and have had this long committed experience with can all of a sudden become this sort of just entity without a personality. And what's interesting about rage is that when somebody is in a rage, all of their previous agreements that they've made with a person, or the history of their bonding and their goodwill and all the shared pleasures that they've had together are completely denied. And, you know, and that's why they say until the rage is under control, you don't even start, you know, therapeutic interventions, because the rage has to be tamed first.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. You can't, it's a little cart before the horse. We can't be relating to each other and listening, communicating with each other if this, you know, kind of rage monster is sitting over here on the couch with us. So let's get him out of the room first. And with that in mind, you know, let's turn our attention, because, you know, first of all, what I love about this, what you've made so very clear is that it helps us really to step back, even if we don't do it in the moment. If it's a post-mortem when we go, okay, what just happened here? we can really see, okay, was that anger? Was that aggression? Was that rage? We can start kind of looking at what's actually happening for us and have some language and understanding, which is always so empowering, just to even understand what the hell is going on here. And so then we want to talk about what can we do about it, right? So we have, anger. What can we actually do about anger?
So one of the little phrases that I love about anger that we use is claim it, tame it, aim it. And what we mean by that is when we say claim it, tame it, and aim it, claiming your anger means accepting, which is the opposite of denying, the legitimacy of your impulses that are self-protective and are meant to be there. They're there for a reason. And recognizing the effects of anger in your body. So you have to have the ability just to literally to recognize that feeling is coming up and to accept that it's there and to agree that it's there for a reason. Taming means shifting this self-protective impulse that we have from the sympathetic or the rage system to the parasympathetic or what we call the social engagement system. This means developing the capacity to be able to hold your anger long enough to shape it into a humane response. And this usually means doing some body work. I'll talk a little bit about more about that later. And then aiming has to do with channeling the energy of that anger through the social engagement system, using that prefrontal cortex. It's moving toward a constructive goal with your anger. So stewing in your anger is not aiming. And, And
we can't just sit around and pout, Ingrid. What's wrong? Why can't we?
It kind of feels good and fun for a little while, and then it's just so destructive. So aiming might include a protest, right? You might protest about something that you're seeing or experiencing, but complaining about something in a way that makes it very clear that you're not prepared to participate in the solution is called whining. And whining is also not aiming.
Got it.
If that makes sense.
It does. It really does. I love this. So I know that you have a strategy called a talking boundary. Can you tell us a little bit about how that works and how it helps, accomplish some of these things that you just shared with us?
Absolutely. So this talking boundary was created by P. Melody. She is a preeminent author on codependence, boundaries, and the effects of childhood trauma on emotional development. She's by far the most profound influence on my personal and professional work, so I just want to give a shout out to her. And this is the way she sets up this way to communicate, such that you're giving yourself the best shot at getting your needs and wants met. So here's what it looks like when you're angry and you want to filter that through a talking boundary. This is how it gets set up. There's 4 parts. The first part is called the sensory data. This is where you're going to talk about what you are observing, simply what you see or what you hear happening. So when I saw this happen or when I heard this, and then the second step is to tell what the thought is that you had when you observed that. And you're always going to speak from the I position. So it's going to be something like, when I saw this, what I thought was this, what I made up about it was this, what I believed about it. And then the third part is to identify the emotion you're feeling, because emotions are generated from our thoughts. Okay, You have to remember you will never have an emotion without a thought coming first.
Exactly. I love that you just said that. I love that. That's something that I teach my clients all the time, and it's so important to really get. So we'll pause that. Keep going.
Okay. So when I see this, the thought that I have is this, and about that I'm feeling this, and then the fourth part, the last part, is what we call your vulnerable request. In the future, what I would prefer is this. So something like, when I saw you come into the restaurant an hour after we'd agreed to meet. So notice I didn't say when you come into the restaurant like an asshole an hour. Right. There's no editorializing. There's no criticizing. It's like just the facts, right? Because if somebody comes into the restaurant an hour after you agreed to meet, they cannot argue with the fact of that, right?
Right.
But if you start labeling and name calling, then that's something that they can argue with. So so it'll look something like this. When I saw you come into the restaurant an hour after we'd agreed to meet, the thought that I had was, you don't respect my time, and I'm feeling angry about that. And next time I would like you to call me if you're going to be late.
Beautiful.
That's it.
Beautiful. Yeah.
That's it.
Absolutely. Really good. So go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, and like I said earlier, the response that you get to that is going to be very, very informative in terms of how you move forward with that person who was late to the restaurant. If they say, I got it, I see how you feel that way, I'm going to work on that, that relationship has a shot. If the person says, you're right, I do not respect your time, and you can hang out for an hour, you know, I'm busy.
That's the big deal.
That may be somebody that you may not want to continue with. But you have the power, right? You have the power to make that decision.
Absolutely. Yeah, I want to just talk through this a little since we have a little bit of time. I know we have some other, we sort of have time, we sort of don't have time, but I want to really hone in on this because I think it's such a key model, and I really want to make sure people really get all the bits and pieces and some of the nuances of this. So, you know, this first step of the sensory data is what I sometimes call the what happened. You know, and like you said, it's just the facts. It's the black and white, you know, of the situation. And the next piece, the thought, is what people I find sometimes struggle the most with, and I have struggled the most with getting in tune to, because what we want to go straight to is the feeling. And we know we're feeling something and we're very connected to that, but taking that moment to actually step back and go, what am I thinking about this that's causing that feeling? Because, for instance, if, you know, your person is running an hour late and you're sitting there thinking, this is awesome, I have this whole hour to myself to just like chill, well, you're not going to feel upset and frustrated.
Absolutely.
It's the thought, that you're being disrespected or that they don't care about you that leads to the feeling of upset. So being able to step back and connect with that thought. The next piece of, and then that next piece of the emotion, a lot of times what I find people do here is they say things like, I feel that you, you know, and anything that comes after the word that has stopped being a feeling.
That's right.
So,
it's a thought.
You know, exactly. It goes right back to thought. So really sticking with the feeling. It's an emotion. It's anger, upset, frustration, disappointed, scared, worried. Yeah. And then what a beautiful thing that we tag on the end the request or what we'd like to see happen next and how we would like it to go. And you're absolutely right. People will tell us a lot about how attuned they are to us in how they respond to that piece. So remembering that part, not just stopping with the feeling and kind of going, so what do you think about that? You know, which is what we often do. Like, see, now I'm upset. What are you going to do? It's, you know, you take responsibility to name the what it is that you want instead, which is huge for survivors because that helps us get in touch with our needs, right? I need you to do this. I need you to do that. So thanks for that. Yeah. So, okay, well, what else do you have? I know, I mean, you must, your toolkit must just be so huge. So I know you could probably talk to us for 3 or 4 hours about these things, but...
So first of all, let me check in with you. How much time do we have left before we start doing Q&A?
Well, I would say probably about another 10 minutes. Yeah, well, we can stay chatting for 10, and then we'll open up the lines.
Okay. So I'll say a few things about anger before we move on to how to deal with aggression and rage. You want to think before you speak. Okay, in the heat of the moment, it's so easy to say something that you're going to regret later. You know how I talked about how the prefrontal cortex and the reptilian brain cannot both be in control at the same time? Right. So think before you speak, and what I mean by that is literally look around the room, find an object that has the longest name and spell it backwards. You cannot do this and act aggressively at the same time. You're forcing your brain to go into the parasympathetic nervous system. So you have the power to do that. Some people like to count to 10. A lot of really aggressive people kind of learn they just count to 10 real fast and it's not enough. So you have to add in something more difficult like spelling a word backwards.
Yeah.
Once you're calm, you have to express that anger, right? Using that talking boundary.
Yeah.
You want to get physical exercise. Go for a walk, go for a run. You don't have to go to the gym and put on the outfit and all that. Just get outside and walk around the neighborhood and take a time out, because they're not just for kids. You've got to give yourself little short breaks during the times of the day that tend to be stressful. So, a few moments of really quiet time can help you feel better prepared to handle what's ahead without getting irritated or angry. So if you have some big stressor coming up in the day, try to set yourself up for success, by giving yourself a break to take a walk or listen to relaxing music or breathe or stretch. You want to identify what are possible solutions. Instead of focusing on what made you mad, work on resolving the issue at hand. Does your child's messy room drive you crazy? Close the door. Is your partner, late for dinner every night? Schedule meals in the evening, or agree to eat on your own a few times a week. And stick with those I statements. Don't, you want to avoid criticizing and blaming, because those I statements give the other person the space to not feel defensive. You can say, I'm upset that you left the table without offering to help with the dishes, instead of, you never do any housework. Right. You want to be really specific. What else? You don't want to hold a grudge. Forgiveness is a powerful tool. I always tell my clients, if you can't get to forgiveness, just get to acceptance. It's good enough. You want to use humor. Use humor to release tension, lighten up a situation. When you find yourself screaming about that toilet paper roll, please, reach for anything you can to put some levity on this, So, and use relaxation skills. You really want to practice your deep breathing, imaginary, what do you call it? When you imagine a relaxing scene, or you can repeat a calming word or a phrase, like take it easy, writing in a journal, doing yoga poses, anything that can encourage that relaxation. And know when you're overwhelmed, know when to seek help, because learning to control your anger, it's a challenge for everybody at times, and sometimes we need some coaching,
guidance.
some guidance. Yeah,
that's right.
So
absolutely. Oh, I love that. Beautiful, really beautiful practical steps, guys. So I hope you're jotting down and taking some notes, because those are all really, really good strategies that you can start implementing. And then, and if you feel like, you're giving it a go and things just aren't quite settling down the way that you would like them to, then definitely don't hesitate to reach out for support. All of us have to learn these things. It's not like we just know how to do it. We have to be taught. And if we weren't taught because we were in an abusive household, then, we can learn now. And that's the cool thing about the brain, is that it will always be willing to learn if we will stop and teach it new tricks. And speaking of that, what are the new tricks that we need for dealing with aggression?
So for aggression, it's going to get, we're going to have to step up our efforts with aggression. Behavioral therapy can be very effective with aggression. It desensitizes us to our triggers. It's a type of conditioning that will change that relationship between the stimulus and the response. So, for example, you can pair social criticism, like honking or cursing and yelling, with a relaxing behavior like singing, and that extinguishes the relationship between social criticism and aggression. There was a movie called Anger Management, I think, and there's a scene in there where the guy is on the bridge with horns honking and people screaming, cussing at him, and he's just having to sit there and sing and breathe through it. You definitely want to remove all alcohol and other drugs. Alcohol, stimulants, anabolic steroids, marijuana, all of these impair your perception and they alter mood states. Especially during the later stages of dependency, alcohol causes a decrease in levels of serotonin, the neurotransmitter serotonin. And they've done studies on rats and non-human primates that show that when serotonin is unavailable or its transmission is blocked, animals become very aggressive and impulsive. Rats with low serotonin levels will attack and kill other rodents. So you've got to have all your guns firing. You know, that's why, you know, removing alcohol and other drugs is just so important, just because lack of serotonin creates aggression. Aggression is a learned coping skill for people with a history of abuse and neglect. You know, we talked about that earlier. Yeah. Children often decide somewhere between the ages of 8 and 14 that they are not going to get close to or be hurt by anyone ever again. For example, a father beats a son with a belt when the father is drunk. The son decides at age 12, you know, this is never going to happen again. When the father comes after him with the belt, the son physically attacks him. And this survival mechanism will follow the boy into adulthood. And group therapy is something that's very helpful for this kind of aggression, because in group therapy, that adult son's family dynamics are going to be reenacted. And often he's going to dare the therapist to confront him. And when he observes that the therapist and the other group members are not responding to him as his father did, the group becomes a very healing mode of recovery. Very, very powerful. Cognitive therapy, we talked about that earlier, you know, where the thought influences the feeling, which influences the behavior. You've really got to take a look at how your automatic thoughts and your underlying assumptions about the world are running you. For example, a core belief that someone might have is that the world is a dangerous place, and that can be a really undermining belief to carry around with you, and you want to shift it to a more moderate, helpful, realistic one. Cognitive therapy is probably the foremost modality that we therapists use today. We're dealing with thoughts and feelings. We're not doing the Freud thing where we're lying on couches and, you know. Yes. We want to use progressive muscle relaxation, guided imagery. That's what I was trying to think about before, guided imagery, and deep breathing to strengthen that relaxation response. And then finally, in terms of aggression, insight-oriented therapy, which helps you to get in touch with what went on in your early childhood, that can connect those dots from childhood to adulthood, can be very helpful with aggression. Neglect and abuse issues do seem to be right brain oriented, and insight oriented therapies do stimulate the right brain.
Oh, wow. Fascinating. I love that, because, you know, here's the thing, folks. One of the biggest things that we can do as survivors is be advocates for ourselves in getting the right kind of care to address the problems that we have. And I know, because I've been there, one of the frustrations that comes up is I need help with this, and then I go over here and it's not the right thing, but we don't know that, right? But then it becomes more frustrating and doesn't seem to be helping, and then we start to think, I'm just broken and nothing's ever going to work and nothing's ever going to fix me, so to speak. And really all it is that we're trying to build a house with a spaghetti noodle, and that's just not going to work. Right. So, you know, I love that you're providing some very clear, like if you're calling therapists, ask them, do you do cognitive therapy? Do you do behavioral therapy? Do you do insight-oriented therapy? And put them to task. And if they, you know, are saying, no, not really, I kind of do this, you know, blah, blah, blah stuff, then you kind of go, all right, well, you're not going to have the skills or the techniques or the approaches that are going to make a difference for me. So keep looking and keep finding somebody who lines up. Okay, so how about rage? Let's talk about that real quick before we switch here to the Q&A.
So when we're dealing with rage, you really want to decrease that reactivity in the sympathetic nervous system again. I keep coming back to Pilates, yoga, martial arts, brain gym exercises. I don't know if you've ever heard of those. Anything that can strengthen that connection between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, that reptilian brain. All of this body work helps to strengthen that connection. When that connection is strengthened, your prefrontal cortex snaps into action faster and keeps you from going into that fight or flight system. When things are very unmanageable, people will have sober companions. The primary duty of a sober companion is to keep a rageaholic emotionally sober, and they will provide on-call or around-the-clock care They will accompany the recovering rageaholic to activities that stress them out. They use diet, exercise, massage, acupuncture, and sober companion treatment usually lasts for about 30 days or longer, ideally until the person can confront challenges at work and with family and legal issues without a rage relapse.
I love that. I could have used one of those. My goodness.
Yeah. Take them on the airplane. It's a real thing. People really do use them, and they can be very helpful. When this is really crucial when there's a psychiatric disorder like depression present with the rage, medication can prevent rage outbursts. Antidepressants and mood stabilizers, antipsychotics, these can increase activity in the prefrontal cortex, which reduces impulsive rage. We talked about shame earlier. Shame is the engine of denial, and denial is what fuels rage. So you have to attack that core shame. And you have to really identify your denial. So if denial is not accepting that something that has actually happened, right?
Yeah.
And ongoing denial is never stable because what other people do and say around you is going to threaten it. And when this happens, those fight or flight dynamics are going to erupt. And after the rage goes away, that denial reforms, probably strengthened by that shame about the outburst. And other people affected by the rage learn not to challenge the denial.
Right.
And so it becomes this self-perpetuating process.
If I can just real quick say something there, is because I think this is one of the first steps in the journey of healing is getting out of the dismissing and the denying about what has happened, and that thing is over there, and I'm not going to look at it, and whatever, it's no big deal. But when we're doing that, it's like, we will be upset about everything but that. And as soon as we bring that out of the corner and we actually start dealing with the thing, as scary as that is, folks, and as hard as that can be sometimes, it is the gateway to healing and getting out of these cycles where all of your energy is going towards being upset about other stuff that's just not even the point. Is that kind of in line with what you're saying there?
Absolutely. And not only is it important to be able to identify things that you've been denying, but even things that you haven't been denying, but you haven't been dealing with healthily, like resentment.
Right. Okay.
So, denial and resentment are very much related. So the way I like to describe it is that denial is disbelief that something that has happened. But resentment is the belief that something that happened should not have happened. And the most justifiable reason for this position is the belief that it happened through the ill will of somebody else and that it should be reversed by some, imaginary judge. So resentment is a defense that we use to hide an unmet need or a desire that is too painful to acknowledge. To dissolve resentment, you have to discover and admit what you really want or wanted. And there are many, if you're familiar with the 12-step program, there's a whole inventory page of possible things that you could have resentments toward, ranging from the institution of marriage all the way to, your Uncle Tom. I mean, the gamut is huge, the things that people can develop resentments for.
Got it. So, okay, well, this is super, super helpful, and I'm sure, we're going to stay on the line for, another bit here, folks. So right before we get to the Q&A, I do want to make sure that you all know how you can follow up and get in touch with Ingrid and some of the resources that are going to be available there for you from both her and from myself. So, just as a thing that, hold on a second. So I was thinking about three different things at once, and that just clearly did not work. So what I first want you to know is that you can go to Ingrid's website, ingridcaswell.com, and it's INGRIDCASWELL. And I will also be sending you that link in the follow-up email today. And there's some really great information there about anger as well as codependency, childhood trauma. There's also a free printable quick summary there for you, which is fabulous because we have really, I mean, my head's spinning a little bit because we've got so much great information here. And so Ingrid has, wonderfully taken this and really stripped it down into this wonderful little summary for you. So make sure you go to her website and get that PDF. And definitely for those of you who happen to be in the Los Angeles area who are looking for some support, who are looking for therapy or anger management skills, Ingrid is offering a free 30-minute phone consultation to find out how she can best support you, and just go straight to her contact page and give her a call or email her to set up a time. And I really want to encourage you all to take advantage of that consultation if you're in the LA area, and to check out the resources that she has available to you. And if you're not in the LA area, then I welcome you to check out rachelgrantcoaching.com, where you can schedule a consultation with me there, and I can talk to you more about the Beyond Surviving program. And an element of that work is dealing with the emotional life and anger, as well as some other areas that are impacted as a result of abuse. So did I hit everything there, Ingrid? Anything else you want to add there before we go to the Q&A?
No, you did a beautiful job. Let's bring forward.
Let's do it. Bring on the questions. All right. So here's how this works, folks. In order to talk with us live, you're going to press *6 on your phone, and then I think you'll also be prompted to press number 1. That's going to put you into the Q&A queue, and then I'm going to call on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. And you can remain anonymous, or you can tell us your name. It's really totally up to you. And if you're feeling a little bit like, I'm not sure I want to get on the phone live and ask questions, you can also text your questions to 650-283-5215. Again, it's 650-283-5215. Or you can press *6 to talk with us live here on the line. And listen, folks, look, we're all here. We're hanging out. We all made the decision here to be in this conversation because something is going on in our lives that's not working, right? You wouldn't be spending an hour to hour and a half of your life if everything was A-okay. And so I know you've got stuff going on, all right? And this is like being in the room with, like Muhammad Ali, and you want to be a boxer and you don't ask him any questions. So, I know we all have stuff that starts to come up about, can I be seen? Is what I'm dealing with really that important? Oh, my question's probably stupid anyway, or I don't want to take up too much space, or, all of that stuff. It's just stuff. So I really encourage you to get in here and chat with Ingrid while you have the time, because we don't have a lot of time, but we do have some time, and take advantage of this opportunity to learn from a pro. And while people are kind of sitting with that and thinking about that, or formulating their thoughts and coming up with their questions, by the way, you can also come on the line just to say thank you, or to share what was most helpful or beneficial. We love that. That's always great to hear if you want to share something like that. One question that came up for me as we were talking, and I will hold that question because somebody else has a question. So here we go. Yeah. 2249, hello there.
Hi. I have a question about actually feeling anger, like recognizing it, and then and also about responding to other people when they have anger. I'm getting better at recognizing my anger and learning to speak about it without getting the other person to be defensive. But I struggle a lot with identifying the thought, that part, and I also in my background, like raising your voice was not done, and rage was very much of a like kept in the dark type of thing. And so I find myself in relationships now where, you know, people do express their anger, and I can't respond the way I'm supposed to, or the way I would like someone to respond to me when I'm angry. You know, I just freeze. And so I was wondering if you had any advice on where to go with that.
So when you imagine a scenario where you're not able to have a voice and you feel this freezing feeling, I know it's hard in the moment to know what that is, but if you could think right now, what is that thought that you're having in that frozen moment? And I suspect it's a very simple thought, very simple thought. It's going to be something that's going to have to do with not getting your need met. So if you're unable to say, if you're unable to express yourself, I suspect that there's a lot of fear there, right?
Yeah. And usually,
what is that?
It strikes a chord with me what you just said, because I have found myself, like, after the confrontation and I've frozen, haven't been able to say anything, and the person, like, leaves the room or leaves, you know, the building or something, I'll just call into a ball, and it'll be like, he's going to hurt me. I'm not worthy of being taken care of, and my needs are not important. and just it's not so much the fear that he's going to hurt me, because I know that he's not, but it's that.
Can you give me an example of something he might say that would cause you to go into that frozen place?
It usually has something to do with, like, that I don't understand what he's going through, that
so if he says you don't, so he might say something like, you don't get me, or you don't understand what I'm going through.
There's some of that, and there's also, like, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble putting it into words.
That's okay.
But it's almost like an accusatory, like I feel like I'm not doing enough, and I'm not sure if that's something that he says or if it's something that I interpret from whatever it is he's saying.
So that's a boundary issue. That's a boundary issue, because if somebody is saying to you, you don't understand, you're not getting it, or you're not doing enough, right? That's sort of the overall general statement that he's making, is that you're not enough, you're not doing enough, you're not getting it. What you have to do with that is take that in and ask yourself, is that true, what he's saying about me? Is it true that I don't understand what's going on for him? And if the answer is yes, it's true, I don't understand what's going on for him, what would an adult person who is in a mature, sort of moderate state be able to do in a situation where they didn't have information? When you don't have information, you ask. So you have to own it. So you have to go into your adult state and say, you're right, I don't understand what's going on for you. You're right. Would you like to let me know? Or if you take that in and you say, he's saying I don't understand him, is that true? No, I do understand what he says. You could say, well, I do understand to some degree. Let me share with you what that is, and you correct me if I'm wrong. But what's happening is, and this is about childhood trauma. You're going right back into your childhood state in the face of this person. So this is about being able to remain in your adult, mature state in the face of this threat. And so it's about recognizing in that moment when he says something and you feel that deer in the headlights, freezing up sensation, you have to be able to recognize, here it comes, here's that feeling. What is the thought I'm having? And you have to turn down the volume on whatever else is going on around you, whatever he's saying, whatever else you're hearing, and to turn up the volume on the voice in your head and ask yourself, what is the thought I'm having right now? The thought I'm having right now is he's going to leave me, or he's going to hurt me, or I'm going to be abandoned, or whatever that core belief is. And then you have to continue to have this dialogue with yourself in your head. Is that true? Is that true? He's going to abandon me. In fact, you said yourself, no, he's not going to hurt me. That's not what happens. And so that's how you check that feeling in yourself. It's like you're having a conversation with yourself in your head between the adult you and the child you. And that's what we were talking about earlier when we talked about that spectrum of feeling from 0 to 10, that anything over a 3 is not about what's going on in this moment. Because this is just a guy. This is just a guy saying to you, you don't get me. But you would think from the way that it feels to you that there was an earthquake happening.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to thank you for sharing that because, oh my goodness, do I ever relate. My partners in the past could say something like, hey, you want fried chicken for dinner? And oh my gosh, it would be on. And they would be looking at me like I was nuts, and I was a little nuts. My brain was not working the way I wanted it to be working. So it's totally understandable, and it's totally normal, the thoughts and responses that you're having. And what Ingrid's really just highlighting is that our job, like honestly, the job of recovery is to just start noticing these thoughts for the bullshit that they are. And go, that's just a bullshit thought. That's not what's going to happen. That's not what's really happening right now. And what's tricky is that because of the way the brain works, the brain has no sense of time. It doesn't know. And in fact, when we start getting triggered or we start getting upset, the parts of our brain that tell us what time, like where we are in space and time, they shut down. So that's why it can feel like what's happening right now is really the same as what was happening in the past. But the more you use some of these techniques that Ingrid is talking about, and the more, this is why she's saying just pause, just take a moment, because what that does, and why she says things like look around and name something and spell it, it's because it forces the brain to stop doing its, oh, we're back in 1982 nonsense. And it goes, wait, no, here I am right now with my partner who has a good track record, takes good care of me, and he's just not feeling understood in this moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely. Oh, you're welcome.
You're welcome.
Yeah, very good. Thank you for asking the question. Okay, so, whoops. Okay, well, so I was going to ask a quick question, and again, people, there's still some time to get in and chat with Ingrid, so press *6 to come on the line or text 650-283-5215. So one of the things that I remember feeling very distinctly and that I often hear from my clients is I don't feel anything. I have just become numb to the emotion, and I'm super terrified of even feeling anger. There's this part of me that thinks, oh my gosh, if I actually let this go, or if I let this stuff really be felt, I'm just going to turn into a puddle and fall apart, right? Yeah. I've done such good work, pushing all those emotions away and not feeling any of that. The thought of even being able to feel anger and express it, even in a healthy way, just feels really scary and terrifying. So I was curious if you had come across that as well, and what your thoughts are on that, and how you kind of approach that particular conundrum.
When we feel something or think something, it seems real simply because we are thinking it or we are feeling it, right?
Yeah.
And it feels like it's real. But thoughts like, if I start expressing my anger or feeling my anger, it will never stop. thoughts like that are simply ideas. They're not facts. And
yes.
the way that we work through that is by being willing to consider the possibility that what we think, that what we imagine might happen, might not happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about taking a risk. It's about, because it's almost like it's the way you develop trust in another person is by taking little risks and not getting hurt. And when you can tell yourself, I'm going to take this risk because clearly the way I've been doing it is not working. So
yes.
this idea that I have, right, this idea that I have that I'm just going to numb out and suppress and repress my anger,
mm-hmm.
We can see this isn't working for me. So I'm going to consider the possibility that maybe I don't have this right, that maybe there is another way. And it's about stepping out on that ledge and trusting. And then, of course, what a person will come to find out is that there is an end. People worry that if they begin to express their sadness or they begin to express their anger, it will be this never-ending open flood that will drown them. But the fact is, and this is the science behind it, is that your body and your brain can only process so much pain at a time before it gives you a break. And that's what we mean by waves of emotion coming in and out. You notice that when you're going through some kind of a crisis or a trauma, sometimes you'll catch yourself like laughing at something or, reading a cartoon strip, and you'll think, wait a minute, how am I able to do this in the midst of this crisis? And it's because your brain, your body will only allow you to process so much at a time.
Yeah.
But I do understand what you're talking about. There's this fear that if we go there, it will never end and it will swallow us up. And it's about trusting that someone out there, that there's another way and that someone else can guide you to finding that way. But it's about taking a little risk and realizing, oh, okay, I didn't get hurt. I survived that, and I'm building trust in this process.
Yeah, I love that. It's really beautiful. And, and I love what you mentioned there about just trying little small shifts. Guys, we don't have to change everything all at once. It can be that, well, what happens today if I just try this one little thing differently? What might happen for me?
And I would say to you, if you're an aggressive person and you tend to, act out and yell and scream, I would even say to you, if you're starting this work, I'm not even going to ask you to not yell and scream. I'm going to say, go ahead and yell and scream. All I ask of you is that you start to become aware that you are doing it and that it is a choice. I'm not even going to take it away from you as a behavior. You get to keep doing it as long as you acknowledge that you're becoming conscious of doing it. You're aware that you're about to make this choice. And the fact is that once you start to become aware that you're doing this behavior that's destructive to you, the problem is you can never become unaware of it. Yeah. And so you can only move forward from there. And it's like sometimes people say, damn, I wish I had just never gotten into recovery because I could just keep doing all my stuff.
So true.
But so true. It's like too bad.
You gotta get off.
Too bad.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh, isn't that the truth? And boy, have I been guilty. It's like, well, wait a minute. Hey, I don't get to throw temper tantrums anymore. But at the end of the day, my goodness, the experience of, there was just this moment in my life where I got so clear that I was done. I was like, I cannot keep this up because it is making me miserable. And I am 100% committed to peacefulness. And I've got to figure out how to have that in my life. And it was certainly a journey. It didn't take forever, which I want to make sure I say because we sometimes fall into this, oh my gosh, it's going to take me so long to recover and heal. And it doesn't. It just takes taking one step each day, and we find our way there. And, I had this moment, my partner is an artist, and I went to the grocery store, and I came out to put the groceries in the back of the car, and there was red paint everywhere. And I was
oh,
like,
no.
what in the world? And he had put, one of his paint jars in the back and not put the lid on, right? And so as I'm driving around during the day, I don't even know it's back there, right? So it's tipped over, and luckily our trunk is like it's a hard surface. It's not a carpet, but oh my goodness, Ingrid, there was like that flash that, like you said, like it was like, uh-oh, like I am upset about that.
Yeah.
This is not okay. And I was thinking about, and in that moment, what I did was I got on my phone and I just texted, the paint spilled in the back of the car and I'm angry. Like I just named it. Like I am angry. Happened, and that was it. That's all I did. But I really tuned into in that moment. I could just imagine what it would have been like for me, years before. Oh my gosh. This person doesn't care about me. Why is he always doing stuff to upset me? He's so irresponsible. Oh, my God. It would have been such a thing. And I probably would have come home and, threw the paint can at him. And, it would have just been a mess. And instead, when I got home, he came in looking appropriately hangdog. And we had a conversation. Exactly. I was like, what happened there? He's like, oh, I just forgot it was back there. And, I said, all right, well, let's, make sure in the future that, we get all of our supplies together before, So,
and that's such a huge victory, just those little daily things. That's where you see the work, the payoff is in those little things that, in the past would have ruined your week, and because you would have made it mean that he didn't care about you, but because you've done the work, your thinking is much more moderate, much more realistic, much more in line with what's actually going on in the world instead of this idea that you have in your head about the way the world is set up to be out to get you.
It's so true. It's so true. Man. So, Ingrid, I don't know how your time is, but we did get one more question. So I'm thinking maybe we take, it's a text question, so maybe we take just a few minutes to address that, and then we'll wrap up. So I recently started therapy and am working on taking up space, dealing with limited patterns of thinking, but recently went more into describing my experiences based on how much distress I feel depending on the memory or situation. Felt totally exhausted after that session. I don't feel like I feel anger normally unless it is projected upon me, projected onto me from another person, and I react with anger. When it comes to my trauma, I feel sadness, disgust, and often moments of realization of how I am still affected by my trauma even today. So I guess my question is, am I angry and not showing it, or should I try to feel anger, or is it suppressed in different emotions?
Oh, you're going to hate me. I need you to read the question again.
No, it's okay. There's a lot there. So,
I really want to answer it thoughtfully, and there's so much there. I really want to understand the question.
Okay. So the key piece here is that expression of anger is only happening in response to anger. Otherwise, it's kind of suppressed or vacant or absent. And the main emotions that she's experiencing right now are sadness, disgust, and she's getting connected to the impact of the abuse on her life. But she's wondering, am I actually angry and I'm just not showing it? Is it in there? Or maybe I'm just not angry. Is that what's happening?
Okay. And then what was the specific thing? What was the specific thing that was asked about? She had a session and that she left feeling just exhausted. What happened in that session?
So there wasn't a question there, but just it was context. So she was asked to describe an experience and then connect that, almost on a scale, how distressing is that memory or situation.
Okay.
Yeah, so they were taking her through some, you know what that is. And so, yeah. And then the last piece here was just, should I feel anger or should I try to suppress it? Yeah. So, there you go.
So what I see coming up right there in black and white on your text, Rachel, from this person is what I see coming up in anger management work all the time, which has to do with the use of these words should or shouldn't, these ironclad rules that we use with ourselves about the way we imagine things are supposed to be. And I suspect that way of thinking, that kind of pressured thinking on ourselves, that there's a right way to be processing our trauma, or there's a right way to be on this road to recovery, is really somebody else's voice.
Mm-hmm.
It is the way that it is. It looks the way that it looks. Do you have anger? Yes. We're equipped to feel all of the feelings. I suspect that from what she's saying, that he's saying is that he's become very expert at suppressing that, and not feeling it, or not being able to show it. But anger, yes, anger is in all of us, but it has been sort of mutated in some ways. If we've grown up in environments that were shaming, or where people, parents used threats and humiliation to punish. So I think that what's great about this question is that this person is so in touch with actually what is going on with them, that they are experiencing that sadness, that they are experiencing that sort of that grief. Mm-hmm. And the anger that's coming up in response to the anger, you're going to deal with it no differently than you would if you were the one who was initially being sort of, intruded upon. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's really answering the question very well. But the biggest thing I get from that is this idea that there's a right way to do this. Yeah. And I really strongly believe that there is not. And that we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to find that.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, the only thing I'll kind of add to that, because this is something that I had to realize, because while I had tons of anger, and I was like the crazy redhead, and I was super good at rage and aggression, I wasn't good at feeling the anger about the abuse. I could get angry about everything else, but I couldn't get angry about the abuse. And it was only in the moment. And so what I've learned in my process was, oh my gosh, I can't get angry about this because I am still taking responsibility for this.
That's right.
When I was still in the space of this is my fault, I did something to cause this, I couldn't get angry because who am I going to get angry at except for maybe myself? Right. But as soon as I did the work, and there's some work to do, but as soon as the work got done of shifting the blame to where it belonged, which was from me to the abuser, boy, then I could access that anger. Yeah. And so I just add that to the table because it may just be like you're actually in a great place if you're starting to feel that sadness and noticing like, wait a minute, this person did stuff and it messed with my life. You're starting to get present to that, then you're starting to get into the, the mix of where, you might be right on that edge of where, being able to access that anger, being able to access that anger is more of a possibility.
And I think people who have been, survivors of trauma, survivors of abuse, have such critical, harsh voices in their heads that they speak to themselves with. And I would just, I would so encourage you to put the hatchet down. And when you hear yourself talking to yourself in a way like, I think I'm supposed to be feeling angry. Should I be feeling angry? Am I bad at feeling my anger? It's like you need to show up for yourself and support yourself in a way that is helpful and nurturing. And maybe say to yourself something like, you know what, I don't know where my anger is. I don't know if I have some anger, but I'm curious and I'm open and I'm looking. I'm noticing I get angry when somebody else presents me with their anger. That's what I'm noticing, but I'm doing the best I can right now. I'm doing the best I can and noticing everything that I can as fast as I can.
Love it. Absolutely. Yeah, that is absolutely the most beautiful note for us to kind of finish here on is at the end of the day, folks, it's just about having grace and being generous with ourselves and being on the journey and as much as it hurts sometimes, accepting where we are knowing that we can get to the next place, but we're not going to get there by, berating ourselves and judging ourselves, but rather through self-acceptance and self-love. And yeah, that's really wonderful. So I want to just take a moment here to really thank you, Ingrid, for taking the time out of your busy life and with everything that's going on with you to come and spend, this time with us. It really just makes such a huge difference. And I love the framework that you've shared with us. And again, folks, don't forget to go over to Ingrid's website and check it out. I'll be also in the follow-up email, in addition to the recording, I'll be including a link to the quick guide that she talked about, so that will be there for you to easily access. And you're just such a blessing to us tonight, Ingrid, and thank you for all of the amazing work that you do and your commitment to seeing people through to the other side. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It was such a pleasure.
Absolutely. All right, folks. So I also want to take a moment to acknowledge you who are here on the line and say thank you for taking the time to be with us and for taking the time for yourself. Oftentimes just acknowledging that we need some support, that what we're doing is not working, and that we've got to get some information and figure it out is such the first step. So you have done that this evening. So, everyone pat on your back, applaud, cheer, yay, whatever you need to feel like, yeah, you know what? I did something good today. I did something for myself and for my healing. And please don't hesitate to reach out to either myself or Ingrid if we can be of any support to you in your healing. And until next time, take really good care of you and many, many blessings. Good night, everyone.